Welcome to week 3, and today we're going to be looking at the basics of flying your drone. And the most important thing before you even get started, before you consider taking the drone out of the bag is, well, location, location, location. We're here at the hidden beach at Ballintoy. It's a nice wide open location. There's no one about, and this is the perfect place to fly a drone. Before you take off from anywhere, you need to check and make sure it's actually somewhere you're allowed to fly. And once you're there on the location, there's several things you should be doing before you take the drone out of the bag. For me, one of the most important things is the weather. It's currently sunny. 20 minutes ago, it was not sunny, and it looked like it might rain. The last thing you want is to have your drone in the air, flying, and it starts to rain, or it suddenly gets windy, and you risk losing the drone. So I use all kinds of weather apps to make sure it's safe to fly. You don't want to fly in rain, you don't want to fly in snow, and you don't want to fly into like really thick fog or mist. If you fly in rain, you fly in snow, you fly in fog or mist, the drone will get wet. They're not waterproof, and that can end badly. You also don't want to fly if it's really, really windy. Each individual drone will have a wind resistance. That is a wind speed that it's capable of flying in. You can check on a weather app and it will tell you what the forecast is for that day. There are two things you need to look out for in there because it will give you the average wind speed, but it's also going to give you the gusts. You need to check both, because if the average wind speed is 15 miles an hour, that's quite windy, but most drones can handle that, but it's gusting at over 30 miles an hour, you risk losing the drone in the right circumstances, or to the point, the wrong circumstances. Something that amuses me and probably frustrates me slightly as well every single Boxing Day is I go onto Facebook and I see someone has crashed their new drone, and nearly every time you look at the explanation, what happened? I hit a tree. Why did you hit a tree? I didn't see the tree. Why didn't you see the tree? Because I was looking at the controller. Okay, you weren't looking at your drone. You need to have really good situational awareness. You need to know what is around me. Are there overhead power cables? Are there flocks of birds nearby that if I disturb them, they're going to suddenly fly in my direction? Just what kind of hazards or obstacles are there that I could potentially crash or hit if something went wrong? If you're happy enough, it's clear, you then need to start looking about for where can I take off from? Ideally, you want to find a nice flat piece of ground, not too near anything. This is perfect, nice wide open space. The ground here is a little bit rough, but what you can get is you can get a landing pad and you can set it down and it'll maybe cover the grass if it's wet, or here, these rocks are quite damp, it'll cover those and it'll give me a nice flat surface to take off from. So as we mentioned last time, you've registered your drone. We're here on location, we found a good place to fly, we've checked the weather is good, we've had a walk around, there's no people, we know where we're going to land in an emergency, we're ready to go, so let's get ready to fly. A useful tool I have is this. This is a wind meter. The proper name for this is an anemometer. It's a word I can't pronounce. We'll just call it a wind meter. But this will give you an accurate reading of what the actual wind speed is. So if I turn this on and I hold it up, there we go, 4 miles an hour. So perfect flying conditions. One important thing to remember is though that even though it's 4 miles an hour here at ground level, as you climb, wind speed increases, and 100 meters up, it could quite easily be 30 miles an hour or more. So if you are flying, you do end up in stronger winds, and you notice the drone's starting to drift, and it's a direction you didn't want it to drift in, or it's getting harder to fly, or it feels like it's starting to get pushed, the best thing you can do is descend as fast as you can, making sure you're keeping the drone within line of sight, because the lower you get, the wind speed will decrease, and that can be one of the best ways to get you back down to safety. So the drone I'm using today is the DJI Mini 2, and the reason I picked it is because it's a sub 250 gram drone, which means that there are less restrictions around flying it, and it's also in general quite a good beginner drone. In certain countries, including the UK, if a drone is over 250 grams, you're more restricted on where you can fly it. unless you have additional training, which will be talked about elsewhere. So that's why the little Mini 2 is a good one to start with. So when I take the drone out, one of the first things I do is I check the props, make sure there are no nicks, cuts, and also take a quick glance to make sure they're sitting flat. If one of your propellers has a right angle in it, don't fly it. Also, I would advise against just bending. If there's a severe bend in it and you bend it back, that bit is permanently weakened. So if the props are damaged, replace them. It's not worth having a prop snap into during a flight. But I just have a look, make sure there's nothing gunking up the motors as well. Have a quick look over, make sure there's no damage on it. Make sure the camera is nice and clear and the gimbal's moving freely, and then I'll just set it in the middle of my pad. So just tap the button on the bottom of the drone once to make sure I've got 4 lights. That means I've got a full charge. I'm not going to turn the drone on yet because you do not want to have a drone switched on with no controller, because it's just good practice to have your controller switched on before the drone, because that means you always have control. So this is the controller. On the bottom here, you have the controller sticks are stored in these little recesses. You take those out and you screw them into place. Do not lose these. They're very small, and if you lose them, you're not going to be able to fly, so just be really careful. On the top of the controller is this holder. This is for a phone. Kind of grab the top and pull it up. Before you put your phone on, there's a cable here that you just move out of the way. You need to make sure you've connected the correct controller for the phone that you're using. I'm using an iPhone, so it's a Lightning controller. If you're on Android, it might be a USB-C or a USB mini controller on here. Take my phone, insert it in here. Now you need to make sure you've downloaded the DJI Fly app before you do this. It's a good idea to do that at home in case you end up flying somewhere where you don't have signal. But I plug that in, press and hold the power button. So it's one tap and a hold, that switches on the controller. And normally when the controller switches on, it will automatically load the app for you. Your left hand is probably the most important because it controls the elevation, the height of the drone. So as you push up on this stick, throttle will increase and the drone will rise in height. If you move this stick to the left or the right, what that does is that rotates the drone in space. That's the yaw. And then the right hand stick, you push it forward, the drone will go forward. You pull it back, the drone will reverse. You go right, it'll go right, left, it'll go left. And when you're learning to fly, you want to keep these things simple to start with, just make simple movements. But once you become more advanced, you start to combine the movements. And that way you're doing these compound movements where you're turning it while you're raising the height or lowering the height. And also you could be controlling the camera at the same time as well, because on the bottom here is a wheel, and that wheel, as you move it, tilt the camera up and down. So to be able to get really good shots is learning how to intuitively use all these controls at once. Most drones have a function called return to home. This function gets activated if the controller becomes disconnected from the drone. If the battery becomes too low, it'll also activate. And also if you push the return to home button on the controller, it will activate. Now what return to home does is, it's not going to necessarily completely get you out of trouble, but it can help. When return to home is activated, the drone will go to a preset altitude, and you can change that in the settings, and it'll fly back to where it took off from wherever your home point was set, and then it'll descend and land. Now that's great if you're flying out in an open area and you lose signal, or your battery's low and the drone knows it needs to start heading home. You can get in trouble if you fly the drone maybe around the back of something. Say you're up high in mountains and you fly around the back of a tall peak. The possibility then is that the return to home might have it trying to fly back through the mountain, which it won't necessarily be able to do. It's going to get stuck, it's going to cause all kinds of problems. Or an example I saw recently, someone flew underneath a bridge, the signal cut, return to home activated. Because the drone was only about 2 meters off the ground, it ascended up into the bottom of the bridge, bounced off it a few times and dropped into the river. Goodbye drone. The important thing I think is here that you're responsible for the safety of the drone and the flight. Don't just rely on the built-in features. They're great, they can give you a lot of confidence, but ultimately you need to know how to control the drone and how to get it back safely. I'm going to switch on the drone now. So you want to press and hold that button. You'll hear a tone, you'll hear a little chirp, and if everything's connected properly, you will then see an image will come up on your phone. If nothing comes up on your phone, or you get red lights or yellow lights flashing on the drone, it might not have been paired to the controller. If that's the case, just check the instructions. It's usually quite a simple process. So the drone is now connected to the controller. I've got image on the screen, and I'm looking here at the top right, and I want to make sure that the little icon, the little satellite icon, is white. It'll start off in red. You'll see a little number appear. You might be tempted to take off before it turns white. Do not, because of that, if you take off beforehand, it does not have proper satellite fix. But I have got proper satellite fix. That is white. It's updated at my home point. If you look in the bottom right of the controller, you'll see a little map. If it's hidden, you'll see a little map icon. Tap on that, it'll open up. You can tap on the map again and it'll open up full screen, and then you can use that to zoom out and just verify that the drone is actually where it says it is. If the drone says it's at the North Pole and you're not at the North Pole, do not take off. Wait until you've got a proper GPS fix and your home point has been set. Once again, have a look on the screen, check your battery level. You can see at the top there, I can see my battery level is at 99%. Really important to keep an eye on your battery level. Modern drones are smart. They will tell you when you need to return home. You're personally responsible. Don't rely on the technology to do everything for you. But typically the drone will warn you when it gets to about 30% that it's time to turn around and go home. The drone will also know if you're flying a certain distance away. It will know roughly what it thinks the amount of battery that it needs to get home is, and it will warn you and say maybe it's time to return to home. But if there's a strong wind and you fly out with a strong wind and you need to turn around and fly back home again, you could find yourself in trouble if you fly too far away. So battery management is really, really important. These drones will fly for 20-25 minutes, but that doesn't mean you should keep it in the air for that long. My average flight is probably only 10 to 15 minutes, and once I get to around 15 minutes, I'm thinking about landing because I'm keeping an eye on my battery. I don't want to risk having to land somewhere I don't want. If you're flying out over the sea, the last thing you want is to be trying to fly back when there's wind, because you won't be able to emergency land somewhere that you're going to go and retrieve it. The drone lands in water, it's well, it's going to be the company of the fishes. You'll notice up on the top left-hand corner of the screen, it says N mode. That's normal mode, and that corresponds to what you'll see down here on the controller. You've got Cine, normal, and sport. Those are 3 different control modes. Cine smooths out your movements and makes your flight paths a lot more smoother. It can mitigate maybe erratic motions that you make with the controllers. You might think that's a really good option if you're getting started, but it's not, because there's a slight delay in the controls when you're using Cine. With normal, that's just your standard controls, and that's what you want to start with. And then sports mode, that's the drone going full speed. And typically, if it's a drone that has obstacle avoidance sensors, they will be switched off in sports mode, which is really important to know, because if you're flying in sports mode, you're at much higher risk of having a crash. So if you're getting started, just leave it in normal mode for now. I can see I've got on screen it says takeoff permitted. So that means the home point's been set, satellite's there, conditions are good. It also means that the DJI app, the Fly app, hasn't detected that we're in a no-fly zone. The DJI app has a list of all the places where you shouldn't fly, including places like near airports. And when you open it, you can look at the map and you can zoom out, and it will show you if there's any warning areas nearby and what those are. And generally it'll give you a warning whether or not you should fly. Don't just rely on that, because that's just telling you where the airspace is safe to fly and kind of pointing out any major known hazards. It won't tell you if you're on private property, so make sure that wherever you're going to fly, it's a public open space and you're able to do so. Also on screen at the bottom, you have some information. The important ones to keep an eye on is height and distance. If you can remember, we're only allowed to fly up as high as 120 meters, and distance, we're only allowed to fly out to 500 meters. So keep an eye on those and make sure you're not exceeding those. We're ready to take off. Spinning drone propellers do two things. They create a lot of noise. So this is going to get noisy, so I'm going to step back so you can hear me better, but I'm also stepping back because they are sharp and they will cut you if you stick your hands into them. So you've got to remember that this is not a toy, this is an aircraft, and if you do daft things with it or get too close to propellers, you could get hurt. So make sure you step back to a safe distance before you take off. That's especially important if there's any wind, because it could blow the drone in your direction. There's two ways you can take off with the drone. You can do it manually, or you can do it with a button on the screen. We're going to keep things simple. We're going to start with a button. And lastly, before you take off, just remember, if the drone starts doing anything weird and you need to land in a hurry, it's the left controller. Pull the stick down, it will descend and land. So let's tap the button on the screen. So you tap it once, and it brings up a little circle. You press and hold, and the drone will automatically take off. Congratulations, you're now flying for the first time. What you don't want to do at this point is decide that you're Top Gun Maverick and you're just going to take off and loop around the nearest rock stack. That's how to crash very quickly. Just resist that urge and practice basic movements to start with. And the most basic movement is just going up and down. So while I'm on the spot there, I'm going to, with the left hand stick, lower it a little bit, raise it a little bit, and the drone goes up and down. Just try that a few times. What you will find is that the sticks have different sensitivity levels. So if I do a large movement on the stick, the drone will do a large movement. If I do a small movement on the stick, the drone will move slowly and it'll be a small movement. So just practice that up and down, and practice pushing the stick a little further. You'll see you'll get more of a reaction. Up and down. And also with the left stick, you push that right and it'll rotate right. Push it left, it'll rotate left. Let's go all the way around. We're going big. We're going 360. This is very dramatic. And same again, if you push that all the way, it'll go faster. You push it just a little bit, it'll go slower. Here we go. We've mastered going up and down and rotating the drone. And now the right hand side, just a slight movement to the right with the right stick. Oh look, it's going that way. Left stick that way. Pull back on the stick, it'll go towards me. Push forward on the stick, it'll go forward. Going right and back. Well, maybe just we'll land it here. So land it, bring it back over the pad and pull down on the stick. Make sure it's over the pad. And as you're going down, you can make corrections with the right hand stick. When it's over the pad, just pull down and hold on the left hand stick and it will come down and land. I've shown you the automatic way to take off. Personally, I never use it because I prefer to be like in full control of my drone at all times. So I always do a manual takeoff, and it's really, really simple. Once everything's connected, once you're ready to go, once it says takeoff permitted and you look around and it's safe, you just take the sticks and pull them down into the bottom inner corners at the same time, and that arms the props. At that point, they're spinning. The reason I like to do this instead of pushing the button is that it spins the props while the drone is still on the ground, and that can sometimes alert you if there's any issues with the props, because you might hear like a weird noise or it might sound different than it normally does. So that's one of the reasons I prefer it. And then to take off, you simply just push up on your left stick and the drone will take off. So you're going to land, and there's two ways you can land. You can do a manual landing or you can do an automatic landing. To do an automatic landing, come in, get over the top of your landing pad, and then you'll see on screen you've got the little arrow pointing to the edge. Press that and it'll say land, and it's the reverse of taking off. You press and hold, it says the aircraft will land in its current location, fly with caution. Press and hold and the drone will land. And it might I've got a prompt on the screen now that says make sure the landing area is safe. I hit OK, and it lands. We've practiced taking off, we've practiced landing, we've practiced going up and down, rotating, and going left to right and forwards and back. And that might be all you ever do for your very first flight with the drone. Just never fly outside of your comfort zone. And do that as much as possible. If the controls feel weird to you, just feel free to keep the movements really, really simple and quite close and really slow to start with. Keeping it slow in general to start with is a good idea, because the slower you're going, the sooner you're going to recognize danger, the sooner you're going to be able to stop or course correct. And course correct is really a good way to summarize how you will be flying when you get started. When you start to fly further away, it's really about, where do I want to fly to? And you start to go there, and if it's not going right, well, you make a slight correction. Keep it slow, keep your movement slow, and keep it safe. Something that's very important is you make sure you have your eyes on the drone at all times. When you're starting, you need to be able to get your brain mapped to what the controls are doing here, to what the drone is doing in space. When you get good at it, you'll be able to fly a figure of 8 without actually looking at the screen. You should be checking the screen for things like distances and how far you're going and whether the satellites are connected and your battery, but you should make sure you've got the eyes on the drone, you know what's near it, you know where it is, and you know that it's safe. But we're going to take off again now, and we're going to fly slightly further out, and I'll just show you a few basics about course correcting as we go and keeping it safe as you start to fly further away. As soon as I arm the props in any drone, I always do the drone operator swivel, which is, and that's just to make sure that no one has snuck up on me and there's no one standing nearby before I take off. There's nobody there, we're all good, so I'm going to take off. And this time I'm going to climb a bit higher. Let's take it up to, we'll go up to 5 meters, that way it's sort of out of the way. So I'm going to rotate the drone around, I'm going to look where I want to go. So I think what I want to do here, I'm not going to go too far away, but I'm going to fly, there's a white rock in the distance, I want to fly towards that white rock. So I get the drone, point it there, I can glance at the screen to see it's pointing in the right direction, I look up, make sure everything's okay, and then I push forward on the stick, the right hand stick, and off the drone goes. Glance to the screen, I look at the drone, I glance at the screen, I look at the drone. If you've ever learned to drive, this is very much like what you're supposed to do with the mirrors in your car. You're using the steering wheel to control your car, but you're constantly checking your mirrors. It's the same with the drone. Screen, drone, screen, drone. So I'm flying forward. There's a bit of a hill in front. Okay, I may want to go up slightly higher over the hill, so as I go forward very slowly, I'll push up on the left stick and I'll check the drone to make sure, yes, it's going up, and we go over. Now I can see some people down there, down to the right hand side. Maybe just a good idea if you're learning to avoid them, so I'm going to make a slight correction. I'm going to take my left stick, push it to the left, and the drone will rotate, and then I'm pointing away from those people, I'm not flying in their direction anymore, and I'll continue on. So looking down, the drone is now 45, 50 meters away, which maybe is about as far as you want to go on your first few flights. Any further than that, the drone, while you can still see it, it's harder to see what it's doing in the air, especially when it's a small drone. When you're learning to fly, it's important to be able to see what direction it's pointing. This is where it gets slightly complicated, because I'm now going to point the drone back in this direction. And at this point, your controls are suddenly reversed. So rotate the drone around. Point it back, there we are. We can wave at it. You can see the whole crew. The illusion of filmmaking has been broken. So I can see there's a really nice view along the coast there. So I might fly out in that direction. I'm going to lower down. So left stick, pull down. I'm going to go down. Just so I can see the top of that hill in the foreground. And that's a really, really nice composition. So it's a really, really simple shot. Just over the top of that little hill in the foreground. You'll get that nice foreground rush, and then we'll sort of reveal the landscape over the top of it. So we'll fly forward, the right hand stick, pushing forward, keep keep my eye on the drone, we'll bring it back. It's a nice, slow and steady. And all the while I'm glancing up, I'm looking to see who's nearby, where people are. There's a child over there, I've got my eye on them. There's some people over there. So the info on the screen I'm checking most of all is battery. I'm currently at 45%, and once that hits 30, I'm thinking about coming home to land. I'm also constantly checking the height and the distance. I want to make sure the height doesn't ever go over 120 meters, and I want to make sure the distance doesn't ever go over 500 meters, although we're keeping it quite close for now. There we go, just a safe first flight, slightly further away. I'm going to turn the drone around and I'm going to fly it back and land it. It can be really, really tempting at this point to just go a bit nuts with the drone, but it is so important that you take the time to learn the controls first. Just practice it over and over again. So bring it nearby. So I bring the drone nearby and then I bring it down. Right, so the drone is currently side on to me, which I think is an important thing to mention because the drone controls control the drone relative to the direction it's pointing in. So if I hit right now, the drone will move right in relation to where it currently is, which is towards me. It won't move right in the air according to where I'm looking at it, because for it to move right is now actually forward. This is why it's so important to keep flying, because it's easiest to be able to control the direction when you're behind it. When you're beside it or in front of it, those controls change. That's why it's so important to master them nice and slow before you start doing further away, more complex shots. So we'll just bring it in and land. And as it lands, I'm making tiny little corrections to make sure it's centered. There we go. So we're going to start now building up to more complex movements. And the very first complex movement you should practice is flying in a circle. So if I want to fly a circle, it's going to go around me in this direction. I need to push forward on the right stick, and on the left stick, I need to push right. So that means the drone is going like this, and then it's been corrected like that. So I'll just do that slowly, and again, just start these movements really, really slowly. There we go, starting to turn. And flying in a circle is just a juggle between how much you're getting the drone to turn, plus how much forward movement you're giving it. There we go, and I'm rotating as well, just to make sure and keep my eye on it. That's us flying in a circle. Start with a nice wide circle, and then you become more confident with that. Try and see if you can fly tighter circles. So flying circles is just a really good movement to do to get your brain mapped to what the controls are doing. So once you've flown several circles in one direction, reverse it and fly back the other way. So you're still pushing forward in the right stick, but this time the left stick is going to the left. So practice that. And you'll find that suddenly it feels weird again. Watch the drone, watch the screen, but mostly watch the drone. There we go, nice circle. You'll find once you get the sticks into the right position, you just hold them there and the drone will just circle. Once you've flown in a circle for a while and your eyes are spinning, the last complex movement you want to do is add those together and fly a figure of 8. So fly one circle, and then at the end of it, fly back round and fly a figure of 8. This is tricky to do because when you think of a figure of 8 in your head, you're viewing it sort of flat in front of you, like that. Whereas this is taking that, laying it flat and flying around it that way. So this requires a little bit of, your brain has got a little bit of work to do here. So I'm just gonna take the drone over to that open area and fly a figure of 8. So I'm gonna start my first circle. I'm flying out. This time my left hand is turning the stick to the left, flying around, and now my thumb is going to go in the opposite direction, to the right, to complete the second circle of the figure of 8. This is a complex move. This is a tricky move even for someone who's been flying for a long time, but it's so good to nail those finer controls, I'm going to go back in and do another loop. And this is just helping my brain map to what the controls are doing. You want to get to the point where it's completely intuitive. We've come up on this rise here to show you how to do what's probably one of the most useful drone movements for showing off a location or showing off an object, and that's the orbit. An orbit is when you fly around an object while the drone is pointing directly at it. So I'm just going to arm the props and take off. Right, I'll stand myself right in the top here so I can be the center of attention. So what I'm looking for here is this spot where we're standing. It's going to be right in the middle. I'm going to fly around it. So I'm going to tilt the camera down just so I can see where I'm at. There we go. Okay. And just try and get myself top of this rock centered. Now to do an orbit, what you're trying to do is always keep the thing you're focusing on right in the middle while rotating around and maintaining distance. And to do this, it's a combination of a sideways movement with rotation. So you basically, as you're going sideways, you're rotating, and if the drone starts to move away, you're then also pushing forward or pushing backwards to maintain distance. So it is complex, it can take a while to master, but again, it's a really, really good move just to practice slowly and over and over and over again. So I'm going to start here by moving very, very slowly to the left, and you'll immediately see I'm starting to not be in the center. So I take my right thumb and I move it to the right, and you'll see the camera will be rotating around, and I'm back in the center again. See, that's just a case of me continually correcting that movement. Check my distance, I'm still at 24 meters, so I haven't gone any further away. I've gone to 25, so I'm starting to go a little bit away. So with my right thumb, I want to push very, very slightly forward while I'm pushing sideways, and that will just keep the drone back at that original distance. There it goes. I can speed up a bit. The more I push on the right stick to the left or right, that will speed up that movement. But as that speeds up, the distance at which it's going to move further away is going to increase. So I got to increase how much I'm moving on the left stick, and also push further forward on the right stick as well. So this is a complex move. It looks so simple on screen, but there's a lot happening at the same time, and you can see here I'm just constantly correcting. I'm just going to rotate around so I can keep my eye on the drone, and that is a really basic orbit. But once you master it, it's a really, really good way of showing off a location. We're spinning that drone right round, baby, like a record, baby. There we go. So the figure of 8, the orbit, and flying in circles, they're really basic moves, but they are the building blocks of just about every single complex movement you'll get with the drone. And if you just spend lots and lots of time, might not seem exciting, but you spend lots and lots of time practicing those movements, you'll master the drone in no time. Now, what would happen if I'd come all the way up here and a gust of wind had blown and my landing takeoff pad had blown into the sea, or probably more commonly, I just forgot to bring it with me. This isn't great surface to take off on. So this is where I might want to do hand launch, as launching the drone from my hand. It sounds scary, but if you do it properly and you do it in the right conditions, it's pretty safe, and it can really, really help you when the environment isn't that great for takeoff or landing. To do a hand launch, turn on the drone, and just hold it in your hands. When you're gripping it, grip it. If you look underneath here, if you make sure you grip it below that little hinge, that little bracket level there, always grip it underneath. It's a safer place to grip it. As you can see in the top here, the props cannot get at my thumbs. You see that? So as long as I keep my hand in this area when I'm holding it, they can't get me. Now, when you are taking off with it, probably is best to put your hands flat like that, but if but it's just safer gripping it like this until you're going to take off. So get the drone, connect it to the controller as before, make sure it's connected, make sure you've got takeoff permitted. Make sure everything's connected up, make sure the home point's been set, everything's all good, and then you'll notice on the left hand side of the screen you've got your takeoff button. And remember, when we tap that, a little circle comes up, we have to press and hold, and after you press and hold that, you've got a couple of seconds before the drone powers up and switches on. So the way you do this, if you're needing to stand, or the way I do it is, I set the drone controller on my arm like that. This helps you if you've ever worked in a restaurant. Tap the button, press and hold the takeoff button. As soon as I do that, I take my controller into my right hand and I'll reach out my arm until the drone switches off, and then it will take off. So we'll do that now. So press and hold, controller over here, and release. Okay, so that's it taking off. If I want to land it and do a hand landing, so you can do this with the automatic function, but I think the safest way to do it is to get your hand underneath the drone and then pull down on the stick. So get your hand underneath, pulling down on the stick, you'll see the drone will rise up slightly. So keep holding down and you'll see it descending, and then you can catch it. So not everyone is going to want to risk that because there is a slight risk to it. If you catch your fingers in it, disclaimer, you will probably cut your fingers. So just to warn you. But if you practice a bit, you do it somewhere where it's not very windy, it can be done safely, and it can mean you can launch and catch your drone in places it might be difficult to take off from, especially if you don't have a landing or takeoff pad with you. Well, we're done filming for the day. We decided to do this intro in the most stereotypically Irish scenario we could find with the sheep in the background, but I'm just going to finish this video with my 3 top tips for starting to learn to fly, and that's take it slow. Don't rush into things, just really slowly learn those skills and then gradually speed them up. Practice, 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 practice. Do not expect to go out and be absolutely spectacular the first time you fly the drone. It takes time for your brain to map to the controls, it'll take time for you to get used to the technology. Combine those 2 things, taking it slow and practice. And the last thing, be aware of your surroundings. When you're getting started, most crashes happen when you're not paying attention to what's around you. Thanks for watching this video. Hope you find it useful, and make sure to come back next week when we're going to be looking at photography.